Hello and welcome to Cologne on this lovely spring day, bright sunshine, a bit windy, and I would like to invite you to follow me to some more beautiful churches that we have in this wonderful city. And if you happen to like the video, then please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you won't miss any future content on this channel. Thank you.
We begin our excursion, as you might tell, we were on the banks of the Rhine. I left my car in an underground car park in the harbor area, and our first stop is the Church of St. Severin. It's one of 12 big Romanesque basilicas in Cologne. It's a former collegiate church which dates back to the 4th century, and like most of the churches that you're going to see, it was severely damaged in World War II and reconstructed thereafter. Our next stop is the Kartäuserkirche. It's a Gothic church built in the 14th century and used to belong to the Carthusian convent in this place. That convent was dissolved by the French in 1794. The church was then used as a storage facility of both the French and the Prussian military hospitals in the area. The church was handed over to the Protestants in 1928, and ever since that, it's one of the city's Protestant churches. We then move on to this church, St. Maria vom Frieden, St. Mary of the Peace. It's a Baroque church built in the 17th century, one of very few Baroque churches in Cologne, and it still belongs to a Carmelite nunnery. This one, too, was largely destroyed in the Second World War in April of 1942 and rebuilt after the war. Another interesting historical note about this, in 1933, Edith Stein, a Jewish woman who had converted to Catholicism, joined this convent, and she was later murdered in Auschwitz. The next church here is St. Georg, another one of those Romanesque basilicas. It's a former collegiate church built in the 11th century. It too was heavily struck by Allied air raids in the Second World War, and one part of the church, a Renaissance hall from the 16th century, was not rebuilt after the war. And there is also this little cemetery in the interior court. This footage is a bit older because on my recent visit, this court was closed. And if I had to pick a favorite church in Cologne, I guess this would be it. St. Maria im Capitol, St. Mary in the capital. Definitely my favorite one, with St. Pantaleon a close second, and I will present St. Pantaleon on the third video of this series. This is the little gate of the Three Kings here outside the church, through which allegedly the relics of the kings were brought to Cologne. Overall, the church dates back to the 8th century, and it used to be the second most important church of Cologne, trailing only the cathedral. This rood screen, as it is called, dates back to the Renaissance era. What you see here is something we've seen from outside already, these three conches. St. Maria in Capitol is the oldest church in the entire Rhine-Maas area with this architectural trait. The church was probably built at the site of an old Roman temple dedicated to the Capitolinian Trias, hence the name St. Mary in the Capital. Our next stop is Alt St. Alban. It's the ruins of a former parochial church that was first mentioned in the 12th century. After being destroyed in World War II, it was not rebuilt, but kept as a ruin to serve as a memorial site. Inside, there is this sculpture, The Mourning Parents, created in 1953. On we go to Groß St. Martin, Great St. Martin, one of the most prominent traits of Cologne's skyline. And yes, it's another Romanesque basilica located in the middle of the old town. It was the church of a Benedictine abbey by the same name, and since 2009, it is used as a collegiate church again. The original abbey was founded in the 10th century, and the church was hit in no less but 5 Allied air raids during World War II. Underneath the church, we have these excavations here because it is built atop of former Roman buildings, initially a bath and a sports complex, and later the Romans replaced that with warehouses. So we're standing on very historical ground here. And then St. Maria in Liskirchen, the smallest of those said 12 Romanesque basilicas. And as you can see here with these frescoes on the ceiling, it is the only church with most of these frescoes still intact. This Madonna here is called the Skipper's Madonna, which sometimes leads to the whole church being referred to as the Skipper's Church, although there is no historical evidence that this church ever was the main church visited by skippers or boatsmen. And as a bonus, I have some bycatch, which I made on my way from church to church. In all, it was about 6.5 kilometers, so roughly 4 miles that I walked. And what we have here is the Severinstor. It's one of three, or depending on how you count, four remaining medieval city gates in Cologne. And this is something that I discovered on the way between St. Maria im Frieden and St. Georg. It's the Karlberg fountain, which I had never heard of before. Here we have the Gürzenich right next to Alt St. Alban, the city's old festival hall that was built in the 15th century. Just a few steps from Alt St. Alban, we have Farina, the world's oldest perfume company, which was founded by Johann Maria Farina, the man who invented the perfume known the world over as Cologne, or in French, Eau de Cologne. If you have watched my video on the Christmas markets of Cologne, you might recognize this part here. It's the Alter Markt, the Old Market, one of the most traditional squares of Cologne. And on my way back to my car, I walked along the harbor and this marina. This harbor was rather out of use after World War II, being replaced by other harbors. And I remember it was a fairly rundown site when I was young. It was renewed in the early 2000s. This is the old harbor master's office, one of the old buildings that have been renewed here in the harbor area. And it's a nice combination of old buildings and new buildings, as you can see. And finally, the Bayernturm, part of the old medieval fortification standing right next to the river, the name probably being an old German word for watchtower.